Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. In this video, we're going to talk about and we're going to cover a lot of the signings and acquisitions made by the 49ers in free agency. We're going to discuss their background and what I think their role will be with the team. We have a lot of players to talk about, so let's not waste any more time and let's get right to it. So with this video, we are going to cover a lot of the other signings made by the 49ers. I've already done videos on Javon Hargrave, on Sam Darnold, a number of key players that we re-signed, but here I want to basically quickly go through all of the other players that the 49ers have acquired in the offseason. We'll get a bit of a background on those guys, and then we'll talk about their role with the team for the upcoming season. The first player that we're going to talk about is going to be Clelin Ferrell, the edge player out of Clemson. Now, Farrell was a former top 5 pick back in the 2019 draft, went 4th overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. He's 6'4", 265. He's about 26 years old, so there's still definitely room and time for him to develop and maximize his potential. Now, if we look at his career with the Las Vegas Raiders, he has 10 career sacks. To me, his best years came in 2019 and 2020, and I also thought last year he was pretty okay too. Now, if we look at PFF, what he did there is 2020 was really his best year, 76.1 rating, which is definitely better than average. 2019, 2022 last year was okay. 2021 being his worst year. Now for me, I'm going to just preface this, and this goes for all the players. PFF, I don't think of it as gospel. I just think it's a useful tool to look at, and just in terms of like another grading system for player performance. Now, when I think about Clelin Ferrell and what's his role with the 49ers going to be, well, to me, I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw guys like Jordan Willis, what we saw Kerry Hyder, what we saw even from a guy like Charlie Omenihu, maybe not getting as much snaps as what Omenihu did, but a rotational guy, someone who can come in, really just fill in for other players, allow other players to get some rest on the sidelines, but he is going to be a relatively important part of this defense. We really needed depth at edge, and I think he is a key guy that the 49ers looked at. He's on just a one-year deal, $1.2 million guaranteed. However, I do think that the 49ers have high hopes for Clelin Ferrell just to be able to fill in when we need him to come in there and provide solid depth on the defensive line. The next player that we're going to talk about is going to be offensive lineman Jon Feliciano. Now, Feliciano, 6'4", 325. He's a big dude. He's been around the NFL since 2015, a former 4th round pick. He's 31 years old, so he's definitely, again, he's been around the league for a while. Probably best known for his last 2 stops in Buffalo and then last year with the New York Giants. And I think Feliciano is a guy who is really going to be solid interior depth for the offensive line. He's played offensive guard and he's played center in the past. Now, if we look at last year, he played in 15 games. If we look at some of his stats, he did give up 3 sacks. He had 6 penalties called. But really, I think something that's been really impressive when looking at a guy like Feliciano is the 2 years prior to last year, actually no sacks allowed in 21 and 2020. However, he wasn't a full-time starter in those years. He did play significant snaps and didn't give up any sacks. Now, going to PFF, which is, of course, another really, I think, a solid rating system. He did have some struggles overall in performance last year and the year before. I think really his big thing is that to me, he's much better at offensive guard. So we do need a quality backup to a guy like Aaron Banks, to a guy like Spencer Burford, and that's what his role is going to be with the 49ers. Essentially, I see Jon Feliciano as the replacement for a guy like Daniel Brunskill. Feliciano is getting $2.2 million guaranteed this year, just a little bit less than what Daniel Brunskill is getting with the Tennessee Titans. But I think it is a really solid move. A veteran guy who's been around, played in some big games to back up our 2 young offensive guards and can also play center if we need him to as well. So a really solid signing by the 49ers. Isaiah Oliver is the player that I want to talk about next in this video, and he is a cornerback, former 2nd round pick out of Colorado, and was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. Now, to me, he's a guy who I really liked him coming out of college. really a fit for, in terms of size, in terms of skill set, for what the 49ers do. If we look at his size, he's 6 foot, 210 pounds, and I liked him coming out of Colorado in that draft. And I think this is a really, really good pickup for the 49ers. Of course, we lose Jimmy Ward in free agency to the Houston Texans, and this is the guy who's going to come in and basically replace Jimmy Ward as the nickel cornerback. So let's take a little bit of a look at his stats from last year. He played in 12 games. He had an interception. It was actually on Jimmy Garoppolo, 1 sack, and then 7 passes defensed. Something that I really think that was impressive too with a guy like Isaiah Oliver is that he only allowed a 76 quarterback rating when he was targeted. So really, really good performances there. And that's kind of on par with what we've seen from a guy like Jimmy Ward in the last few years. Something else too, if we look at his PFF ratings for the last couple of years, 78 rating in 2022, 72 in 2021. So these are both, average to above average grades that are given to players, and I really do think that, considering the price and the amount that we paid for a guy like Isaiah Oliver, this is really good business by the 49ers. And I think he's a guy who's just really finding his identity and what he's going to be in the NFL, and that's going to be a starting nickel cornerback, and that's what we're going to need him for. The other great thing too with a guy like Isaiah Oliver is he is one of the best run defenders from the cornerback position in the NFL, and that's something that's so important for the 49ers in the defense of what we ask and expect of our cornerbacks. So overall, really great move. It's a 2-year deal, $1.2 million guaranteed to Isaiah Oliver. Really like this signing. This next player is someone that we acquired in a trade with the Carolina Panthers, and that is kicker Zane Gonzalez. Now, when you look at the trade details, they are a little bit silly. It was like a 2025 conditional swap of 7th round picks. So essentially we got him for free. And if you look at what he's guaranteed this year financially, it's nothing from the 49ers. No money guaranteed for Zane Gonzalez. If I had to look at what his role is going to be with the 49ers, is that I do think the Niners will draft a kicker at some point in the draft, and you'll basically have an open competition between that kicker and Zane Gonzalez. Now, if we look at his numbers, overall career numbers, they are okay. A couple of things which I do really like though, and the things I really like are from extra points, 95% from extra points, which is just good to have someone you can reliably hit extra points and get those that 7th point on the board after a touchdown. Also, another good thing is that his touchback percentage, so the percentage of kickoffs that end in a touchback, 58%. Compare that to Robbie Gould last year, which was about 10% lower than that. And I'm a huge fan of just kicking it back, touchback, and let the offense start from the 25-yard line. Now, overall, just as a kicker, 80.5% career average, which is okay. Could be worse, but definitely could be better. And the one concerning thing is from 50 plus yards, only a 61% career kicker. Compare that to Robbie Gould, who's 70%. So quite a bit lower. I don't think someone you could say is a reliable guy, but again, we got him, someone to bring in. He's still relatively young, and he'll be for competition for whichever rookie kicker that we will bring in the draft. So a really solid move, I think, and we didn't give up really anything to get him. So there you go, Zane Gonzalez. So the 5th player that we are going to talk about is going to be Austin Bryant, edge player, 6'5", 260, was drafted back in 2019 in the 4th round by the Detroit Lions, and he spent his 4 years so far in the NFL with the Lions. Now, if we look at his production, not a whole lot to go off of. Unfortunately, he's really only been healthy for 1 year and played significant snaps, and that was in 2021. He had 4.5 sacks that year, 10 pressures. Outside of that, yeah, he's been hurt a lot and just hasn't played. Now, if you look at his PFF ratings, they haven't really been that kind to him, but let's kind of like take a little bit of a look back, because to me, this is a low risk, possibly high reward type signing. It's a 1-year deal, not a lot guaranteed at all. And if he's going to be a guy that we hope will basically get the effect of the coaching from Chris Kasarik, being, in the same room in terms of defensive line group as Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead and all of these guys, where, again, he's not going to be the focal point for opposing offenses. Let him just do his thing. And he's shown a pretty decent pass rush repertoire, and he's shown some decent athleticism. So being able to get out there as part of a good rotation on the 49ers defensive line, I think he could potentially excel. And similar to when we brought in Arden Key, maybe he comes to San Francisco for a year, earns himself a big contract. And of course, he's going to be going all out to get this big contract. Like Arden Key, maybe gets a big one-year deal elsewhere. And that's kind of the 49ers recipe in recent years. Bring in cheaper guys, let them play well here, get a big contract elsewhere, and the 49ers end up with a decent compensatory pick. But overall, as a signing, I think it's really solid. He'll be a rotational guy. Hopefully he stays healthy. That's going to be the biggest question with a guy like Austin Bryant. Myles Hartsfield is the next player that I want to talk about in this video. He was brought in on a one-year deal with zero guaranteed money. He's a versatile defensive back, undrafted back in 2020 out of Ole Miss. Now, when we look at him, he's 5'11", 210 pounds, and he's spent his career with the Carolina Panthers. Now, to me, the role of a guy like Myles Hartsfield is going to be essentially helping the secondary players get acclimated, get familiar in terms of, and helping just them to learn the Steve Wilks defense. Now, there is a chance that, of course, he can make the 53-man roster, and one of the big things going for him is the fact that he's so versatile. So having a guy like him who can play safety, who can play nickelback, who can play a little bit on the outside as well, could be to his benefit. If we look at his stats overall, though, a lot of it's not great, but the one good thing is only a 6.3% missed tackle rate. And if we see anything, whether it's been in the solid defense, the D'Amico Ryans defense, and it's going to be very similar in the Steve Wilks defense, is going to be that the defensive backs have to be able to tackle well in order to be able to play here in this defense. Something, though, that hasn't been great is he allowed 4 touchdowns when targeted last year, 3 touchdowns the year before. And if you look at the quarterback rating of quarterbacks when they target Myles Hartsfield, it is always 100 plus throughout his 3-year career. So that's definitely not ideal. He has an uphill battle, I think, to make the 53-man roster. But overall, I think it's a pretty valuable addition simply for the fact that I think he's going to help all of these guys, especially the younger DBs, get acclimated to the Steve Wilks defense. The last guy that we're going to talk about in this video is going to be offensive tackle Matt Pryor, who the 49ers brought in on a very cheap one-year deal. Now, if we look at Pryor as a player, he was drafted in 2018 in the 6th round. He's 6'7", 332, so he is just a big human being, just a massive dude. He spent his first 3 years in the league with the Philadelphia Eagles, last 2 years with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, his first couple of years in the league, he really didn't play much, if at all. So the 3 years that we're going to look at are going to be his last 3 years in terms of performance. 2021, by far his best year. If we look at a 76.5 PFF rating, so that's definitely better than an average starter at tackle. What I really do like that year as well, didn't give up any sacks. I think the one thing that if you look at his other years, though, 2020 and 2022, that he did play significant snaps, it wasn't so pretty. Whether it was with PFF, really low grades, or even just in terms of stats, the things that he gave up. So 2022 and 2020 gave up 6 sacks in each of those years. He also does average giving up 6 penalties a year, which is not great, but also could be a lot worse too. Now, to me, when I look at his role with the team, it's going to be of course, it's going to be a backup tackle. I think you're starting left tackle, Trent Williams, no question about that. Right tackle going to be Colton McKivitz. Then you have Jalen Moore, who to me right now is the primary backup at tackle. We could, of course, draft somebody to be a right tackle. I know a lot of 49er fans are looking for the Niners to draft a right tackle with one of those 3rd round picks. So then where does Matt Pryor, where does that leave him? Well, to me, he's going to be a guy where I think he's going to find it to be an uphill battle to make the 53-man roster. However, the Niners, I believe, would be happy to put him on to the practice squad. And then should there be any injuries, we can elevate him to the 53-man roster. And therefore, we would have a guy who has some experience playing the NFL. In 2021, played pretty darn well. And I think we'd be really happy with the depth then at offensive tackle. But overall, one-year deal, not much money involved. Got to be happy with the signing here for the 49ers. And that will just about do it for this video, guys. I do want to hear your thoughts in the comments below about the signings that the 49ers have made. Who, from this list of players that we talked about, who are some of your favorites? Who are some of your least favorites? Who do you think is going to have maybe the biggest impact for the team in 2023? But as always, guys, if you enjoy the content, do drop a like on the video. Consider subscribing to the channel. And before I head out, you know I'm going to say 2 things. the butt counts, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.